is the second meeting of the year with the Wolverhampton BCS branch, and we are very privileged to have a gentleman who comes to us all the way from Palmer just yesterday, Mr. Richard Hodder. Now, as well as myself, we have the current chair of our Wolverhampton branch, Sherry Sankey. We also have a number of people joining us online, and as we go along, I think we're going to more shenanigans. Okay. As the evening progresses, we'll have an opportunity to talk about some of the fine detail of Richard's presentation. So, without further ado, this is a gentleman who I have known since, is it 2015 or 14?
2015.
2015, when he was studying for his master's in cybersecurity, and he was doing some very interesting things at the time. He has gone on to do even greater and even more interesting things. So I'm going to get out of his way. I'm going to give Richard a chance to talk about his subject today, maritime cybersecurity. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming. Do you want to? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just say slide. Yeah. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks, Herbs, for bringing up from Spain to Wolverhampton for this presentation. Yeah. My name's Richard. My background is telecoms, IP network engineering, routing and switching. I've worked across financial sector, oil and gas, the satellite industry, maritime, and now the yachting industry as well. Primarily on the network side of things. My first degree in 2004 was internet technology, which at the time, with the internet being quite young at the time, didn't really cover too much of the internet. It was more data comms and computer science type stuff. But that ultimately led me going into the network world. I became a Cisco engineer and gone through all the Cisco qualifications there. Yeah, next slide, please. You want to let Ling Zhong in? Yeah. There's somebody waiting at the end of the room there.
Can I see him?
Oh, that's right.
Someone already.
Maybe somebody else can do it. Yeah, so I quit my day job about 3 years ago, to start my own business in the yachting industry. Like I say, primarily that was in oil and gas, and more recently it's turned into the yachting industry, where I've noticed from a cybersecurity point of view, a technology point of view, a massive gap in that the rate of change with the technology and the actual security that's been applied on board. So yeah, you can go to the next slide, please. Just tap it again. One more time. Something I'm going to go over first of all is not actually technically related. It's more about what we are as human beings and how we respond to technology. So this presentation basically is a mashup of presentations I've done with food training and awareness, some extra bits I've added for tonight. But I always put this slide in there, and it's just a thought. How quickly can you guys respond to a cybersecurity event? That could be a cybersecurity event in your own life, you know. I'm sure we've all come across it. We're all getting bombarded by phishing emails. Can you go to the next slide? So this is what I want to get to, the predator theory. So we as humans are the perfect predators. Ever since the dawn of humans, we're designed to actually go out there on the attack. We can work in teams to attack. We can work in teams to attack other teams of the same species. There's not many other species out there that do that. They play fight. We play in teams. And because of that, because we've come to the top of our food chain, if you like, we have had the need not to defend ourselves. So always on the attack. And our weapons have evolved from the club, the armed force, to cannon bombs over the years. And more recently, in the digital age, I'm sure a lot of you guys here are coders yourselves. Code is now the way that we're using code as a weapon. And that's where the cybersecurity attacks come into. And if you think about how we act as a community, we used to have that in our villages. You know, as people, we used to get together. Nowadays, we're looking for that community actually online, in games, in different forums and what have you. And the way the technology has evolved so quickly, our ability to actually defend ourselves in the digital space is, you know, we haven't evolved quick enough as the technology has evolved. Next slide.
Oops, sorry, did that not go? Oops.
Anyone heard of President before? Or that concept? What does anyone think of it? Something I was chatting to a colleague about the other day. It's something that he's coined, and you know, it goes down to defending ourselves from cyber attacks. And as I go through this presentation, the maritime industry, the yachting industry where I'm involved, they're not prepared for cyber attacks. I mean, especially in the maritime and yachting industry, the internet and connectivity has evolved so quickly over the last 10 years. They haven't really needed to defend themselves. And it's one of those things, if it doesn't happen to, what's it? Well, I'll get my words myself. It won't happen to me. You know? Anyone think about that? You know, and eventually, where so you think about outside, you leave it outside, you say, no, I won't hit it. It's a nice area. Eventually, gets nicked. And then only after the issue has occurred, you go and do something, but you've already lost the fight. So, this presentation is going to be around how easy is it to actually get the super yacht. I'm going to be looking at the various facets of a yacht. This also applies to cargo lines, the shipping industry in general. The reason super yachts is because that's the bit I work with. Next slide, please. So, what exactly is a super yacht? As you can see, as you might have guessed, this is not a super yacht. But super yacht is generally defined as a yacht, a motor yacht over 24 meters in length, and abides by certain maritime regulations as well. The biggest yacht in the world at the moment is 156 meters. It's massive. Thanks. I think there's about 70 crew on board to look after the yacht itself, and that's just for one guy in his family. Next slide, please. So when you, what makes up a super yacht? Obviously, it's a floating thing. It's almost like a floating city. You'll have stuff on there such as cinemas, tenders, beach club, jet pool. Some of these yachts even have marinas underneath for semi-submersibles, that kind of stuff you see on James Bond. Also, some of the yachts, especially the Russian yachts, it's alleged they have weapons on as well as anti-drone technology. So what they'll do is actually put the anti-drone technology, they'll be able to detect drones and defeat those drones. And the way they do that is actually jamming the Wi-Fi frequencies, other frequencies. Next slide. So why would anyone want to hack a yacht? Do you want to just tap that? So Yeah, so why would anyone hack a yacht? The main reason you could think is the owner on board. Could be a vendetta against the owner himself or the rich guests that are using the yacht. Could be ideologically motivated, or even corporate espionage. If you think the owner himself is running the business and another rich person wants to get his secrets, you'll find that in their businesses they're pretty locked down already. They've got policies and procedures in place to actually mitigate cyber attacks. When it comes to the yacht, they're very open. Opportunists, there could be a malicious insider as well. That also applies, like I say, this does also apply to commercial shipping as well. Next slide. So basically, these yachts and the wider maritime industry has become a floating target for cyber criminals. Especially with the pandemic, it's sped up with digitization across the world, as you know. A lot more of us have been sat at home actually working. A lot of the guys on the ships, especially in the commercial world, were stuck on the boats pretty much for the whole pandemic. When they do their rotation, maybe 2 months, 6 months on, and then a 2 months or 6 months off. Some of these guys have been stuck out there for a year or more without being able to get back on land and see their family. So the connectivity to these ships has been more critical than ever. The war in Ukraine is having an effect. It's more having an effect on the Russians at the moment that have all their yachts seized. I don't know if you've seen any of this in the news recently. And the Russians have got some of the biggest yachts in the world. 156-meter steel bar owned by one very rich Russian chap, taken by the German authorities, and then various yachts also around Spain, France, just before they've been making a getaway to get out and head to maybe Turkey or somewhere where they'll be friendly. The authorities have come and seized the yacht with all the assets on board. And now, as a result of that, I think with Bilbao, the biggest yacht, they've just laid off all staff. So, yeah, quite a lucrative job. Obviously, people are doing jobs as a result. Not only that, but the war in Ukraine, I think we're going to see collateral damage in terms of types of cyber attacks that are happening and can affect jobs. In that, there's going to be a lot more email phishing campaigns. There's going to be a lot more attacks on infrastructure. That's going to tie up vessels and other types of critical infrastructure. So the reliance on the internet in the maritime industry has both become critical. It's 24/7 operation monitoring these things. You imagine the number of vendors that are actually involved in running a yacht. Everything from the propulsion to the navigation, through to the communications, through to the people on board. The numbers of companies actually keep one ship going, especially in the yachting industry. The yachting industry actually supports a lot of small businesses. It's a bit different in the commercial world. A lot of that stuff is done in-house. Because shippings, these big container lines will do a lot of their work in-house, but still it supports a lot of the supply chain on land as well. And that's, that's also been a disruption to the supply chain recently with COVID as well. That has a knock-on effect. I guess you guys know about the Ever Given last year, stuck in the Suez Canal. And I think we're still seeing the knock-on effects of that in terms of the economic damage that brings. I don't know how many billions that costs the world economy in terms of lost trade, but we're still suffering from the backdrop there. Complex systems on board these ships as well. So just to control the engines, the navigation, the systems are becoming more and more complex. And the vendors looking after these systems require that access. Remote access is given so they can monitor, maintain, troubleshoot, which becomes a risk for the yacht as well. So we're looking at different entry points on the yacht. connectivity. So that emphasises the reliance on connectivity, not only for the welfare, but also for the management of the yacht itself. And apparently, according to some sources, over the last couple of years, attacks increased 400% on the maritime industry as well, and that's affecting different types of ships. I'll go into some more detail on the types of attacks we've been seeing in the industry. But yeah, there's been a lot of money lost to the economy because of it. And there are regulations coming into force to help this. Believe it or not, cyber has been totally unregulated in the maritime industry up until last year. Whereas in pretty much every other industry, there's been regulations and guidance for quite a while, many years, I think. But the maritime industry, it hasn't been there. So the lack of awareness and that lack of actually understanding the risks that are there as well is, yeah, these guys got a lot of catching up. Next slide, please. So these are some statistics from a couple of years ago, and specifically on the yachting industry. And again, 80% of respondents showing a lack of awareness for effective measures of cybersecurity on board. And the number of people that don't know the difference between different antivirus softwares and, well, the difference between antivirus and endpoint protection. It's quite interesting. There is a big lack of knowledge. And I think this goes for the wider world as well. The general population are not really too interested in these things. They want the convenience of what's on their device. They want a quick internet. They want things to work. That's could be more so apparent than in the yachting industry. If you've got a guy who's spending millions on making everything work, you don't take no for an answer. I mean, if you're on that yacht working, you'll cut whatever corners you can, even if you're going to present risks into that system. Yeah, next slide. So, worst case scenario on board the yacht. Are you guys technical? What kind of background? Maths. Okay. Cool. Do you know much about cybersecurity already, or do you know about GPS? If I was to talk about GPS and that kind of stuff, tracking. So the maritime industry is basically reliant on GPS for getting around the world and avoiding collisions. Nowadays, as well, the shipping industry is becoming more automated in that certain things on the bridge, like you see there, everything's connected. So the journey planning, the radar, the autopilot, all connected together. So the worst case scenario that we look at in the yachting industry is GPS is spoofed, bad coordinates sent into the system itself. The ship actually takes 2 degrees or 3 degrees course change, so it's going in a different direction. Arrives in an unknown location. And say for 2 years, hackers have been trying to get that yacht anyway. So they've been social engineering individuals that work on the yacht, or maybe they're planting people on the yacht itself to feed information back to them, got them access to systems remotely on board. And so when the yacht gets to its location, the crew don't know where they are. They just realise that they're not where they should be. Shut down the engines and take the whole boat for ransom. And it makes piracy of the seas. Why be a pirate and go through all the effort and going out on a skiff to get out there when you can do this electronically? So you basically take the yacht for ransom and then make the demands to the yacht with the owner on board, and yeah, until they meet the demands, you don't have the yacht back over. Seems a little bit James Bond, but I've been told a few times when I go through these different scenarios the crew on board who don't believe this kind of stuff can happen. They're actually in control of this stuff. They don't believe it can happen. They say it's very James Bond, and I have to remind them to look around. You know, you're on a $200 million piece of kit. You're living in a fantasy world anyway. This is James Bond. So that's the worst case scenario, and it's been proven in a proof of concept as well that this can happen. Whether it's happened in the real world, it's hard to say because our whole industry is very private industry. So when things happen, there's a lot of cover up in terms of making sure it doesn't go out in public domain. They just don't want you to know. Next slide, please. So all systems connected to the network, even if they're not. So any system that's running any kind of software can easily be bricked. And there's a perception on board as well that because the system isn't connected to the internet, that nothing can happen to it. Still needs to go through a certain amount of maintenance on board to update the software. What if you introduce to a system that's not connected to the internet? What if you introduce some bad software, some bad firmware, and you end up bricking that device or that system, or a system that Yacht's reliant on for its navigation or for the propulsion? The navigation system is a clear example of that. These ships run a paperless bridge nowadays. The skills of plotting the chart and plotting your voyage, you don't need that anymore. The guys, when they're going through sea school, will do that basic training, but when they get on the yacht, it's usually a paperless bridge. They don't even have paper charts as a backup. So how do they update their charts? That system effectively needs to take the internet to get its chart updates, software updates, that kind of stuff. Generally, they do air gap those systems. Air gap, they make sure it's offline all the time. And how they'll update is using a USB stick. So I'll update the charts onto a USB stick and then bring it onto the navigation system. Problem is, they think they're following best practice. However, oftentimes I've seen the laptops that they're using full of God knows what, smart malware, not even got a firewall enabled. So when I ask, can they guarantee that there's no malware being introduced into that system indirectly, they can't guarantee it. So even though you've got an air gap system, do be careful that you don't introduce something to the system indirectly. So I've seen a few changes on board where they've gone out straight away, bought a new laptop, especially for the purpose of updating their vectors or their navigation system. They lose their navigation, that's the critical system on board. Sometimes to help the engineers on board, in this picture here, you'll see a small switch, which is basically a power switch connected to a network switch. So for the remote vendor, what they'll do when they need access, they'll turn this power switch on. That powers up the switch, connects it to the network, and allows the vendor to come in and do their work on the system. As long as they don't forget to turn it off after he's done his work, that's okay. Otherwise, they're exposing that system to the internet. Okay, next slide. Any questions? Right. So the issues on a yacht. You've got various weak points on a yacht, and that can be the communication system. Obviously, the internet connection coming on to the yacht itself. That is the gateway, or one of the gateways. The AVIT. Anyone know what AVIT is? It's basically the entertainment system. So a bit like Herb with his little pad over there and the HDMI stuff. On the yachts, they'll have something like that controls the blinds, the lighting, music, films, everything. So it's all centralized. That can present an issue. Control systems on board. Like a computer, these yachts connect to all the different systems on board, like the navigation, the radar, etc. There's basically a bus that runs through the middle of the yacht. And it's a physical system called the MIA 2000. And it's a very clunky system. You can screw different components into it, different valves, different monitoring devices, etc. That is a potential weakness on the yachts as well, because if it's exposed in certain places, if there's access to it, you can basically buy devices, you can get Raspberry Pi even, configure something that gives you access, remote access to that system, to give, potentially pull all the data off the yacht. I'll show you a little bit about that in a moment, and how that works. Crew devices, obviously a big problem, or can be a big problem. Crew coming on with goodness knows what on their mobiles, out of date software, bad passwords, the usual stuff, but just that general lack of awareness for looking after your device. Bad network design. So as a telecoms engineer, I've seen this through and through, and this is something you'll appreciate actually. Because internet on board a yacht is about 10 years old in terms of really good internet. Before 10 years, you get on your yacht, you'd sail to a beautiful part of the world, you'd moor up and enjoy the scenery. Now you do the same, but you want to stream Netflix, go on Instagram and watch TV. The problem is that the networks have been installed, haven't followed the best practices of the general networking world. And they've grown as well to include the entertainment systems and all this kind of stuff. So what you'll find is a big flat network with all these devices fighting for bandwidth. First thing you'll notice with that is the usability of the network is pretty poor. Two, it presents a risk because you've got all these different systems on the same network. So you'll have critical systems on there potentially, you'll have your entertainment systems on there, and you'll have users, anyone who's connected. So if malware or what have you is introduced to that domain, then you've got a problem that can affect all the devices on board. Vulnerabilities in third-party vendor systems. So by that, I mean, so recently I've worked on a yacht which was built in 2020. As part of that project, as part of the pen testing, we looked at vulnerabilities in the various systems. I found vulnerabilities from 2008. So it makes you wonder what some of these vendors are doing and how the oversight is actually applied to different people. When you're building a yacht, a ship, and you've got different vendors coming in and putting in these different systems, be it on the bridge, be it the IT, the entertainment, what have you. Those systems, you think of a build projects maybe 4 years old. That was probably spec'd up 4 years ago. Then what's happened is get spec'd up, maybe get stored, and then they go and install the equipment. And no oversight or checks done on those third-party vendors. So corners are cut, like I said, no oversight. Refit and maintenance periods also present a risk. So when you're bringing a ship out of the water, which they have to be taken out of the water quite regularly, for maintenance, regular maintenance. So every 5 years, a ship has to come out of the water completely to be cleaned, to be checked, audited, what have you, for the safety, if anything. You've got no end of people coming onto the boat with access pretty much anywhere, and it's difficult then for the crew to actually keep track of who's coming on. How do you know something doesn't get planted somewhere? A Raspberry Pi device or something like that. Then we've got social engineering. So with the lack of awareness to those threats, it's quite easy to talk your way onto a yacht, especially if you've got an offer of really good internet. Just go along with a pocket full of SIM cards, 4G. Well, you want some good internet? No problem. Come on board, here's some SIM cards. Well, instead of you going and putting them in, I know where the kit is, I can go on board and basically talk your way onto the boat. That's actually one of the more enjoyable aspects of what I do, is trying to talk my way onto a boat or ship. And it varies from crew to crew as to the reactions you get. Some are, you know, pretty harsh. They'll tell you to fuck off, sling and hook. Others are just like, yeah, come on board, come on. So just stop it. Yeah, exactly. So, and as you guessed there from the technology, you get this presentation set up. The IT piece is great. You know, all these things work. That doesn't interest me nearly as much as the people aspect and how we're affected by the technology. And you know, if we're there to make somebody's life easier, potentially, then they're willing to let you come in and you know, okay, I'll find those SIM cards, but you know, find whatever listening devices as well. Next slide. So this is the MIA backbone I was telling you about. And it's almost like coax that runs through the boat. It's weird stuff. And you get all these different modules for different sensors, readouts, displays, all this kind of stuff. And basically, if you want to put anything into this system, you can, you know, you either put a T junction in there, put a new device in, or you know, just break the connection and put the relevant bit in, put in your own device. And like I say, there's been people have played around with Raspberry Pis and managed to get all the sensitive information off a boat through the Wi-Fi of the boat back to their device. So from a monitoring point of view, probably not too bad, but then if you can actually get in there and you can start changing values on the sensors of the crew. So you've got a tank, sewage tank or whatever, fuel tank. You've got a dodgy reading on there. It's displaying too full or too low. And that crew member then goes and takes action to correct what you think is a problem, and actually inadvertently creates a problem when there wasn't actually a problem at all, putting the boat in some kind of jeopardy. Yeah, it's strange old system. It's
Does it have terminators? Oh, yeah.
say again?
Does that have terminators? Yeah.
It does, yeah. So here you kind of terminate the end, ready to extend the network if you wanted it.
Is that technology? Yeah.
Something like that, yeah. It looks almost like the yeah, like the TV coax. It's the same type of connector. Very easy to put together. This is the latest version of 2000, but yeah, it's a very physical system. So you're going to want to make sure that if you've got your yacht, now this applies to smaller yachts. So maybe some of you one day, after you've got through your degrees, good jobs and everything, maybe you get a small boat. Even your small boat is going to have some of this equipment on, and it can be tampered with. You can imagine, even on a small boat, you just screw up all the readings on the boat, the pressure, the speed, RPMs, everything. You're not going to have a good time while you're out there. So the key with this system is not so much the virtual or the internet connected, it's making sure that it's physically in restricted areas. Now, the way some of these yachts are designed, especially the bigger ones, you find I found in the freezer room a whole wall with the different processors for the radar. Who goes into that freezer room? I don't know, but it does present a risk, especially during those refurb maintenance periods. It's not really a maritime university that will appreciate that. But if you do get the chance to play around with some of this stuff, it's worth having a look at. And it's something hopefully with Plymouth University I'm going to be getting involved with to to look at ways of actually hacking this and improving some of the connectivity issues, shall we say, that come around it. So, yeah. Any questions? Right?
How easy would it be to recreate that for an experiment or a simulation?
Easy.
To create, yeah.
Yeah, you just get the relevant parts and set up on the desk, just pretty much like you've got there.
What about from a virtualization?
Virtualization, there's probably some emulators out there that do the same as well. But it's worth playing around with, actually. Just this is it's a very physical thing, and when you're trying to introduce false values or that kind of stuff, it's good to actually see what's happening. You know, in cybersecurity and telecoms world, we work in a world where you might not see the equipment, you might not see how the connectivity actually works. So actually, with a system like this, you can see all the bits fit together. You can see where things need to go. So, yeah, it'd be easy enough.
And I suppose the other question is, you recommend any Russian yacht owners sort of
Scrapping some of this.
quickly in the books?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. So the Russian yacht owners, they're screwed, pretty much all of them. In fact, I just a yacht I've done a quote for recently. I found out on social media just a couple of days ago before I came here that particular yacht owned to a Russian guy. So needless to say, they're not going to come and do work. Yeah, exactly. Which is a shame. And that's the thing, working with yachts and also in the wider shipping industry as well. It's quite murky. You don't necessarily know who you're working with or who the owner is of that ship or that company. There's so many layers of not only bureaucracy, but different companies that are making the whole system work. So yeah, I put a quote out for a boat. I had no idea who the owner is. You know,
That's the international criminal court.
yeah, exactly. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, but most of the time you don't know who the owner is. It's only because of these sanctions that have come out, it's been made public information. Yeah, what a way to find out I'm not getting a job on social media. But anyway, yeah, next slide, unless anyone's got a question.
Are there similarities? I guess super yachts are owned by super rich,
Yeah.
multiple people, but there must be similarities with airplanes. Isolated, using GPS.
Definitely. So with aeroplanes, they're a hell of a lot more heavily regulated than the maritime industry, because of the history.
Well, I'm just thinking in terms of aircraft, like transport to Rolls-Royce, you telling me the GPS, they're just now retrofitting planes with GPS on the outside and unavailable to be meddled with. So some probably have a pilot doing things in the aircraft because they can actually change it. So the one that missing over Indonesia was because the GPS was actually inside, and it's going to take years.
Yeah, I believe that. GPS was so reliable there as well. You know, if you can tamper that.
But all aircraft does not actually have GPS.
But yes,
So why do why are they taking
that's a good question. And one of the reasons I brought the predator theory, one of the predator theory earlier on, is because I think, when you go on holiday, you generally let your guard down anyway. You're more relaxed. Although some of these guys are doing business as well. However, on a yacht, because of the different layers of different people involved, different entities, there's an expectation that when they step on that yacht, they're going to get the best service. Everything is going to be pampered and laid on for them. And that goes for the security as well. So, is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Next slide, yeah. Yeah, just some of the cybersecurity considerations on a yacht, which kind of covers most of the things we've spoken about. Insurance is also becoming a big one, as well as the regulatory side of things, policies and procedures. Also background checks on crew as well. These yachts find it very difficult to actually know the history of a particular individual that's come to work on the yacht. And a lot of these guys have, in some cases, they've got drugs problems, alcohol problems, this kind of stuff. And they're going on these yachts to give silver spoon service, basically. And yes, and the stress they're under as well. Some of these guys do break down. It's not a great environment to work, being a captain, chief engineer, stewardess on one of these yachts. It's a different world. It's a very high pressure world. Everything needs to be perfect. You're serving that person on board. Yeah, go ahead.
So if one of these crew members breaks the law, what's the answer? They'll just
Just get fired.
No. Can we use the police?
There is no police for that. Oh, the police for the sea. How do you mean?
I said, I want to go in.
If you broke the law on a boat,
Depends on how you want to show abandon the area. So it's actually really right.
that's what comes around. If you're doing that on a boat, that's their business. If the owner, what's that? Depends who owns the boat, exactly. Correct, yeah. So the captain, rather than call the police or anything, will probably just lay that person off. The problem then is that person with that history that they've created will then possibly go on and get another job as well. But that's the same for the owners on board as well. A lot, these guys are doing business, they're taking their families, they're doing a lot of good things, but they're also doing some nefarious things as well. Who's checking these guys out when they're, bring their ladies in from land and all this kind of stuff? So it's it's a bit of a murky world. So yeah, go ahead. Top 8 threats. Does everyone know what ransomware is? Yeah, it's good. It's amazing how many crew members don't know what ransomware is. And we've seen it on a number of boats where ransomware has been introduced, and what do? They go and pay the ransomware. I've got there as well machines and firmware, so that would be the actual control systems on board, the PLCs, and also drones are becoming a big threat nowadays, where drones are being used to either see what's going on board the ship, so paparazzi, to drop things on the ship, or actually to hack the systems on board as well. So actually, some of that's something I want to pick up with you, is the whole the drone side of things at some point. It's an area I'm looking into more and more, not just from defeat and detect, but the actual hacking side as well, remote hacking. So yeah, smart devices, that obviously is your IoT, could be your light bulbs, could be your smart tech, whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, they're the main kind of threats. Ransomware is the biggest threat at the moment in the industry, but also email. The rest, people are getting a bit smarter as to, finding the USB stick and not plugging it in. Wi-Fi, still a lot of really bad passwords out there, and poorly configured as well. So yeah. Do you guys know what business email compromise is? That's all. So it's where a hacker's on an email server and they're basically monitoring the email, going backwards and forwards. There's a big problem in the supply chain and the front office problem generally, where hackers on that server are looking for an email that includes bank details or bank transfer, and they'll intercept that email and they'll put their own details in or their own message in the hope that money will get sent. They're going, wow, wait, we've been finished.
There's that phrase, I told you so.
Yeah.
So, how many of the boats actually have the firewalls fitted and things like that these days?
Surprisingly few. Well, I say surprisingly few. There's a lot of yachts out there that don't have a firewall installed. Those have the internet connection, router, Wi-Fi networks.
So exactly, some yachts as well, they have
What can I do for you?
Computers, we're ready. We're good. Richard, put in your office.
Yeah, sure.
2 files.
Oh, yeah. I know that. That's cool.
Oh, so why can't I get Zoom up?
We should be able
Want me to open the Zoom link again?
No, we should be in
Got
there.
them up?
This one.
Yeah. Ah, there it is. Sorry.
There we go.
Minimised.
Okay, so we
Just video.
Video.
Okay,
The
yeah.
whole system.
Can start my video now.
Well, that saves me, right? So we're now a co-host. So hopefully we should be able to turn our video on.
Yes. But we need to share the screen.
Yeah.
And we're back.
Of that planned interlude. Okay, so yeah, where was I? Yeah, top instance. So there's some examples of some cyber and not so cyber attacks that have happened in the maritime world. This first one, Somali pirates, they tracked down the yacht with a couple that had been traveling the world. They tracked down the yacht. They took the couple to ransom, and before they managed to get away with anything, the couple died. The authorities came along, arrested the pirates. The pirates actually had a complaint that they got away with nothing in that case. After all the work that they put in, planning to get to the boat, the efforts, actually holding the people hostage, this kind of stuff, they complained that they got nothing out of it. Maybe a jail sentence. Ada Cruises is a big cruise line, goes around the Mediterranean, Caribbean, these types of places. Just as the pandemic was coming to an end well, no, it wasn't coming to an end in 2020. It was that end of that first wave. Ada sent 2 boats, all COVID protected, all this kind of stuff. And the idea was to have 2 cruises, one in the Mediterranean, one in Caribbean, celebrate Christmas and New Year. They didn't get affected by COVID, but what they did get affected by was major IT outages on board. Those IT outages caused the payment systems to go down, the whole ticketing system to bring people onto the boat as well. And it turned out that they lost access to the shore-based offices as well. So they basically isolated. It turned out somebody introduced some ransomware into the network. Needless to say, as those 2, or as that cruise liner was getting back on its feet, they just shut down the cruises and couldn't move, and basically rebuild the IT for the 2 boats. White Rose of Drax is a motor yacht. It's proof of concept. With what they did was spoof the GPS for controlled exercise. They got a boat close enough to it, injected their own GPS signals to the boat. The antenna on White Rose of Drax picked up that signal, and on the bridge kept the same data. They did not know that the boat had been steered off course and was going in a different direction to what they expected. Maersk Shipping, some of you may have heard about Maersk Shipping ransomware. This is a ransomware attack that nearly crippled the company, and if it wasn't for one server, they wouldn't be alive today. So Maersk Shipping is one of the biggest container shipping companies in the world, and they got affected by ransomware, which basically encrypted all the data on all their data centers globally. They couldn't move the ships as a result. It was costing quite a lot of money per day in lost revenue. The thing that saved them was one server in a data center in Africa, which had been switched off either by a power cut or was just off the network. So somebody was clever enough within the company to say, don't connect that server up. Clearly connected into the network, it would have also got ransomware, and that would have been the end of Maersk Shipping as we know it. They managed to rebuild the whole company from that one server. But it only cost them, in the meantime, $300 million to do that. They didn't lose the money from the actual attack itself. The money was actually lost from not being able to move stuff around. So luckily they didn't pay the ransom. A lot of companies do go and pay the ransom. I know of yachts that have paid the ransom, they've been lucky enough to get their data back. But you're not so lucky. I mean, you're involved in criminals by doing that anyway. And then Antwerp and Rotterdam ports. This is quite an interesting one because there's still issues there that happen to this day. they've been attacked in various ways, but one of the main ways means that containers are actually entering the port and leaving the port completely undetected. And what's in those containers, most likely drugs and what have you. So somebody's been able to get the manifest system and basically rewrite the manifest for those particular containers, and then they're shipped out. Couriers are also paid from outside the port to go in through a hole in the fence of the port, go to a particular container and grab bags of drugs as well. The manifest was likely affected by an employee who'd been bribed after he ended up sharing some photos with a Tinder date, if you like. The cyber criminals got these photos, they bribed him, said, well, you know, we're going to tell people about this. He didn't want his employer or family to find out, but he'd been sending pictures of his parts around. And he agreed to take a USB stick, plug that into the network, and that gave access to the cyber criminals and basically the whole inventory and manifest system. So there's various ways these cyber attacks are happening. They're just some of the incidents that, you know, I've put down as examples. I mean, can our cyber tutors think of any others, Ray? Any incidents you might want to mention on the cyber side that you can think of that have been noteworthy over the last few years?
Involving yachts.
Say again?
You mean involving yachts in general?
Just if it involves the maritime industry, okay, but in general. You know,
Well, I suppose things like open source intelligence.
Yeah.
I suppose what's happened is that it's being used to supplement intelligence gathering services and so forth. But that's gone around the other way now. So criminals are using open source intelligence to implement things like data mining and machine learning, all these AI technologies. And then what they're doing is they're getting they're using systems to just scrape the internet and pick up information left by people. And then what they do is they combine that information, they use that information to all sorts of things, like spoofing people's identity, that sort of stuff. That's quite common.
and they sell those services as well to people that want to buy that.
You can buy that. I suppose there's a lot of that around. But funny enough, actually, the old OWASP, I'm talking technical, I don't know if people know what OWASP is. But there's a common set of techniques that have been going for many, many years, and it's still those kind of common techniques that are still being used. So people are not updating their legacy databases, they're not implementing the sort of hygiene they're supposed to have. You're still seeing that old techniques being used over and over and over again. So
You can automate that as well. It makes it put that together. Anything?
I think things like warshipping, where you kind of get given these gifts, and the gifts are like surveillance objects. So I can imagine that being an issue. You didn't say much about drones. Maybe people can get more about drones unless that's.
Well, I mean, that's the drone stuff is a bit of a up and coming thing, especially in the yachting world. I mean, generally the yachts want to detect drones and get rid of drones, but then by getting rid of the drones, they commit a crime by blocking the public airwaves, GPS signals, Wi-Fi frequencies, which in most jurisdictions that is illegal. You possibly get away with it in international waters. Another problem with that as well, if you're near anything else, you wipe out all the comms for your neighbours as well. So somebody's probably going to notice. And there's an area I want to look into more myself is actually on the drone hacking, being able to hack systems from a drone, using the drone as a point of entry.
you've got some anti-drone technology though, you've got to be careful of. You can take down drones quite easily.
Yeah, you jam the frequencies, the drone can't speak to its pilot, and will generally go back to where it started. But yeah, like I say, that is technically is illegal. I think so. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Do you know if they can the internet back in the past?
Which one? Titanic?
Thinking about
No. No, it would have used some kind of radio frequency to
Famously, yeah, the
Yeah.
Morse code.
the early internet, if you like, the early way of was how communication. Yeah.
Was there any possibility to hack the Titanic by any like all
You could, in a way, I suppose, you could have sent Titanic wrong information. You could have sent messages that.
No icebergs here.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. Now we get into conspiracy.
One I think we haven't mentioned, and this came up a lot when I was working on borders, things like Maritime Id Scrutiny. So where one craft pretends to be another craft for various purposes. Any thoughts on that?
Generally, I see that the ships want to hide it for whatever reason. They're either spoofing their location or offsetting the location by a mile or 2 miles, or they're just switching that technology off. In terms of spoofing other ships, I've not seen so much of that in my experience.
The Russians have just used that.
Oh, that reminds me of that slide in there. So with the AIS, you can go to marinetraffic.com, and one of the ships will tell you the port it started at and its destination, and basically they put an FUCK PTN, I think, as the destination. So yeah.
Is it the same with the airstuff? Because the airstuff you can actually buy the tech itself.
Yeah, it's public.
I know you can build it on with a Raspberry Pi. You can actually create your own traffic.
Yes, you can set up an AIS here if you want to do WLV or whatever.
It sounds like super yachts in particular, until recently maybe haven't dared to take it. And now, so now people such as yourself are providing a very valuable service to these super yachts and their maybe sketchy owners.
Yeah.
So have you ever been approached to do the opposite? Right?
No, I haven't, but I have heard of people doing the opposite as a marketing campaign. So in the cybersecurity world, if you're on the good side, you go by checks and balances and you get everything signed off. You know, it's a legal minefield. If you hack a system that you shouldn't do, you know, you're in trouble with the Computer Misuse Act and all this kind of stuff. So I know one chap, he would go around the marina and he would try and hack into boats' Wi-Fi's. We managed to go on one Wi-Fi, managed then to get further into the network onto the server, found some personal information on that server about the boat, about the captain. So he's gone along to the gangway, asked to see the captain. The captain's come down and the guy said, hey, you know, look what I've done, I've got all your systems, got your information here, you need to hire me to fix this. Captain turned around, went back on board, picked up the phone, called the police, got arrested. So, yeah, it's not going to work. I haven't been asked to do it personally, no.
A lot of them are owned by sketchy people.
Yeah.
You know, they want to rob each other.
Yeah, it's going to be big money after big money. And, you know, to go through some of these operations to actually get on a yacht and do damage to another individual like that, it's either going to be nation state, governmental, crime groups, sophisticated organized crime. You know, you probably hack a yacht, but it's going to do you more hassle. You're not going to get much out of that.
Especially if you don't know who you're hacking.
Yeah, exactly. If they find out who you are, that's not kind of poking that dragon, so to speak. Yeah, exactly. But the thing is as well, I mean, there's an element of health and safety to all this as well. So you've got these ships, some of them size of mini cruise liners. They should be abided by certain regulations. Because some of them are private, they don't need to run by the regulations on health and safety, on fireproofing, on water containment, all this kind of stuff. So the same goes for cyber security. And actually, you know, the crew that are on there manning that yacht, they're people, you know, they're everyday people, they're not millionaires and billions. And you know, if you put them in jeopardy, you could potentially lose a life by doing this. So that's one side of it. The other side is, you know, in reality, in that world, you take an unbiased approach to it. You know, if we do find anything that incriminates a person on board, then that's detailed before we actually go into the project. And there's a responsibility in the industry that, you know, we have to go find something illegal, it should be reported. And that is documented before we actually go in and do the job. So, yeah, it's a weird paradox working in that industry, but like any industry, it's one that needs to have the same checks and balances as any other, in my opinion. So. Cool. Next slide. Sorry,
That's good. Yeah.
Can I just say that they will close the building at 9 o'clock?
don't worry, there's only 15 more slides. There's only a couple more slides. So through training, what can be done to minimize the threat? Like for all of us, 80% of this is just knowing what the problems are. Going back to the technology and how the technology has developed. As a species, we've not kept pace with that rate of change. We're not evolved quick enough. We've got everything at our fingertips nowadays. That is, you know, an expectation. And we go for the convenience rather than the inconvenience. You know, looking at us as people, the bit that interests me most about cybersecurity and digital privacy is not the technology. The technology is great. We can get the microphone working and the battery doesn't go flat, all that kind of stuff. And there's some great minds out there working on it. But the effect that the technology is having on us as individuals, as people, as a civilization, on one hand, it's doing many great things. But on the other hand, you know, it's affecting us, and we're not able to keep up. We can't comprehend what we're doing effectively. We like the path of least resistance to get something done as well. So going back to the predator theory, being able to defend against that, you know, we're not geared up to it. So, you know, if it hasn't happened to me, it's never going to happen. The chances are it will happen in this world where things are getting crazy. Speaking to this chap here about quantum computing, when that stuff gets in, that is a whole different level of computing. Decisions, massive decisions can be made in a finger click. And you know, that's a story for another day. But 80% of it, in my mind, is awareness, crew training. Training for us, just being aware, having the device in our pocket, what the consequences are, leaving the location services enabled on the phone as you go around to all these different places. What's happening with that data as it's being collected? How are Google using that then to track and send adverts to you based on your location, based on your conversations, all this kind of stuff. So we need to be mindful of that. It's great, you know, have a conversation. I don't need to think about what I search on Google. But on the other hand, do I really want that happening? In the maritime industry as well, regulations is going to change the landscape. Insurance industry oversight on the vendors, those guys that are going on installing equipment from the 90s on a 2020 build yacht. Not good. There needs to be some checks and balances on that. And I guess this goes back to the first point, is just the basics, small actions. Knowing it's half the battle and making some small adjustments in your life using good passwords, keeping everything up to date, not having location services enabled. You know, those small things can prevent a bigger problem later on, and that's, you know, that's more so evident in the yachting industry. Go for it. So a colleague of mine, he was recently at, well, 2017 actually, he did a demonstration hacking a yacht in Malta. It was a job he was commissioned for, to go there, hack into the Wi-Fi as part of a project. He went and talked about this at the London Super Yacht Conference, which is a closed event. A journalist managed to get into the event, and the news article that he then subsequently wrote looked like a detailed interview between my colleague Campbell and this journalist on how to hack yachts. So it goes to show that even journalists, not necessarily good anyway, can be good, but you know, even on the good side, you potentially get hacked by people. It's worth a read, that article. Yeah, kind of highlights how poor the industry is at yeah, keeping itself up to date, and even when they're having industry events as well, how poor they are at keeping the right people out. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah. Is maritime industry at risk more than others? I think so. Critical infrastructure, I would put it in the same bracket in many ways. Is hacking a cruise line or a yacht going to have the same effect as hacking a power plant? Probably not, well, definitely not, but the risk is still there. So, yeah.
The US got 76 ports. 75% of their economy goes through those.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if you disable 76 ports, you can cripple your economy.
That's it. I mean,
including the ports.
same as well as if you drive a container ship into the sandbanks of Suez, it's going to do the same kind of thing. It's debatable whether that's was caused by cyber attack, whether we really that's come out publicly. There's been a lot of cover-ups on that. But yeah, it can cost a lot. How easy is it to hack a yacht? Just tap it one more time. It depends. After all that, it depends. Yeah, last slide, I think. And it's just last picture. Thank you. Any questions? Thanks for.
Just going to go to the.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure
Hello, Sanderson.
Hello. We have
Is Sherry there?
Is Sherry there? Yes, is the answer to that question.
Right. Well, can you remind her to give Richard an expense claim form for his honorarium?
Yes, I will do. We're reminding Richard of an expense claim form for Richard's honorarium.
Yes, of course.
We will do. Thanks so much.
Okay, well, that's well, it's been an interesting talk. And,
Thank you very much indeed. Were there any other questions from the chat there?
I didn't see, I don't think there's been any more in the chat, not that I've seen recently, other than getting the system running again.
Yeah, what the hell are you doing over there?
Okay, well then, so thanks very much. We are slightly over, but we'll close that down for now. We do have a couple of other sessions scheduled, and we'll pass the information on. I think right.
Okay, so we're gonna close this down in the room, and we will make information about the talk available via the usual means. So thanks so much for joining us, and we will we look forward to be in touch again. Yes, I believe the PowerPoint will be available for this.